What is going on, guys? Today I have a very special student, Nick Green, in the building. Nick is unique because this man has energy like no other. This man, I tell you, is destined for greatness. And when I first met him, I knew that he was going to be a star. And the more I got to know him, the more depth Shrek in his onion analogy. There's layers and layers and layers to Nick, but the dude is a rock solid man. He's going to build an incredible business. I'm super stoked to have him here. He attended our retreat back in October 2023. Came out to Vegas and he was the hype man of the group. He was giving motivational speeches in every single corner, gassing everybody up, giving them love. And, I'm here to now give him a platform to share his story. So, Nick, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about, where you're at today, what your life looks like, and we'll start from there.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me on here. This a blessing in itself. Like I've always said, I never thought I would live to see a day like this, having this opportunity, expressing myself, doing what I do, and all things that goes back to you in opening this door for me. PTBI is the gateway to everything else I've dove into after the fact. Yeah, man, I'm 28 years old. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm actually from a small town in southeast Iowa, as unfortunate as that is. I moved out here a couple years ago and I was a boxer most of my life, competitive boxer. I actually was a Golden Glove state champion back in 2019. And as I transitioned out of boxing, getting more into life, and as life unfolds, more things started coming into play: family, kids, stuff like that, marriage, all that came into effect. And yeah, I eventually found myself kind of venturing out of the boxing journey. I was very small as a kid. Actually, my freshman year of high school, I was 94 pounds and I wasn't even 5 foot tall. So you can imagine being that small of a person, how much adversity came with that. I got picked on a lot, all that. So naturally started hitting the weights. I was in sports, I was in football, baseball, stuff like that, but I was never no star athlete, nothing like that. I had everything against me being that small of a person. And actually, I was the youngest person in my grade. My aunt was my teacher when I was a kid, and she actually pushed me through to the next higher up grade rather than holding me back. So I was the youngest person in my class. So it was just battling the size, the weight, the athleticism, all that against me. And that led me into trying to get into the weight room in high school to just compensate for all these areas I was missing in life. And none of that really took effect until later on in the years, but just getting in that flow of things. I loved it. I loved everything about training, weightlifting, just becoming big as hell.
I love it.
And, it was just going down that rabbit hole of things, but things didn't really take off till after high school. I got into boxing more, competitive boxing. I pushed kind of weightlifting to the side and dove into that. Everybody has their own journey they go on. I moved out to Colorado. I found myself trying to stay in that area. And as things encounter in life, you have to learn to adapt to them. What other factors do you have coming into play? Work, anything else. When I lived in Southeast Iowa, I was driving 10 minutes to work and I picked up my service truck and I was driving around in that. Now I drive an hour and 15, hour and a half, one way, and then I work outside 10 hours a day. So other factors came into play. My schedule just expanded tremendously. I was still in school, stuff like that. And I found myself like training with boxing, but I wasn't competing. I was putting all this time and energy into it, but it wasn't capitalizing on it. And so I found myself kind of like venturing onto a new journey, which was a weight room. And then I really dove into nutrition. My wife kind of opened my eyes to the nutrition side of things. I was just kind of winging it on whatever, and I eventually invested into a certification. I'm not saying that's like things people have to do, but it's a good start, and that's eventually when you had reached out to me and you were like kind of getting things going. At that time, I was writing meal plans for people for $30 a piece, like a full on investing everything I had into meal plans. And I'm like, here, this is your layout, everything else, just putting so much time and energy to it. And you're like, hey man, I have this whole platform. We could really dive into this. And I'm like, yeah, this is something I want to do, but I'm unsure of it. I'm the most frugal person you'll meet. I've told you this before. I did my research and I tried to find something negative and I couldn't find it, just to justify it in my head as to why I would not invest into this. And it kind of sold me on it. I was like, man, I did my research on you and everything else. I was going back to Zakk Colburn YouTube videos from 2016, 2017, whatever it was. Man, you were just a kid as well. And I'm like, dude, this guy's legit, so I took the risk on it. And right there, that was the biggest factor in this whole thing, was taking the risk. My wife was kind of against it at first too. She was like, the investment behind it, whatever. Like I said, being the most frugal person I am, I wasn't with it. But then when I did it, it was feeling that opened up internally was crazy. Opened up so many doors. And after that, I was ready to go. So after the certification, after all the meal plans, after boxing kind of pushed aside, I found myself like, hey, I like this journey that I'm on. Also, I went through a lot of traumatizing factors in life as a kid. I know you know a lot about that through the podcast and everything else. And I found that my greatest thing was the highest level of growth is healing yourself and then teaching others to do the same. So finding out your niche, everything else through PTBI, whatever it is, guidance was there. And that's how I got to where I'm at today.
I love it, man. I love it. You opened up a lot of doors that I definitely want to dive into. First things first, I just kind of want to recap something that I really, really appreciated about your story that you've opened up many times is like how you said that, you were very skeptical, you're very frugal, you very, very slow in the process with investing in PTBI. You did research on us, scoured the internet for bad reviews, couldn't find any. That's something I really appreciate. I also remember we were talking to you for quite some time and we
Yes.
launched a scholarship program that says, hey, apply and we will consider you to, enroll into the program for free. And I remember you applied for that spot and we didn't give it to you and you were upset and you're like, why didn't you pick me? And I remember telling you, I said, because we knew that you needed to invest in this. We couldn't give it to you for free. And what you described is that feeling that opens up when you make that investment. It's so true, man. Like you can feel so stuck in life, like you have no momentum. And as soon as you make that investment in yourself, man, it's like all the weight comes off of your shoulders and you finally feel free to make progress and move forward. So these are just some areas that I wanted to touch on. But first things first is you have a podcast with Tyler Bassetti. Just tell the viewers, Nick has a really incredible story. We're not going to have enough time to dive into all the details of his story. So if you guys like, I highly recommend that you go watch that podcast because it's an incredible story. There's, lots of learning lessons in there. So search up Tyler Bassetti, Nick Green, watch his podcast. It's definitely worth the time. But dude, let's go back to your career. So you're an electrical engineer, dude. I see you're posting pictures of you in fucking trees and, you got your work lunch and sometimes I see you in the office, how did you get into that? Why did you get into that? And at what point did you decide I need to switch careers and get into fitness coaching?
That's a lot to unpack in itself, but taking it piece by piece. I graduated high school. I knew I wanted to do something, but college was never a big thing for me. I have ADHD like a motherfucker. I say that all the time, excuse my language. It's just something I struggled with my whole life. So school was never really a thing for me. But as the adversity I faced over high school, stuff like that, being a smaller person, I found myself loving every aspect of the fitness journey, how to transform your body, whether it was a growth phase, a fat loss phase, a reverse diet, whatever the fact was. I love the fact of that, just transforming yourself. During that time, I found myself going through a lot of adversity within my own family and just trying to figure out things in life. Nothing in my life ever came easy. I had to figure out this every step of the way, and I messed up a lot of the way. Like that relates back to the scholarship thing. I told you I was pissed. I have a story like none other, and I couldn't believe mine didn't win. But like you said, you read it and you're like, this guy needs to invest in himself. And as much as I was against it, I was like, that was the best thing you could have told me. Because after that, it was a compound effect. The snowball effect is what people call it. It started rolling. And the mind blowing factor behind that is, as much as I was behind it, I'm now up to about 20K investing in the mentors, and I've made all that money back. That's the mind.
Incredible.
And so, as much as I was against it, it comes back around. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? The knowledge I've gained and received is phenomenal. So, back to the work style of things, I was just trying to figure out life, what I was going to do, and all that. I was a welder. I went to college and I went for a year, and I found myself just partying all the time. It was not for me. I couldn't even stay focused. Like school was just not my thing. I finished the first year, but a couple classes I failed. I found myself going down to a case company where I was a welder, which my grandfather, he's worked down there for 47 years now. I mean, it's tremendous. I was like, maybe this is my life, So I was welding there. And then at that time, I got introduced to an electrician job through somebody else that I knew. And I went through there. I did 4 years at one company. I ended up transferring to another, and I've now done 5 years within. I'm about a decade into electrical work now. So while that all came in effect, I was doing a non-union schooling, and I ended up quitting through a lot of adversity in my life. I was mad at the world. I didn't want to be around anybody. Long story short, I ended up hitting this guy at a job site and got kicked off the job site. I got almost fired. I actually did get fired from my job. Before you could fire me, I ended up quitting, and I joined the union side of things. I've been there 5 years now, going on was 6. So about a decade into it, restarted schooling, all that, everything was against me and, factors getting played out. As I transitioned out of the boxing journey, just getting in alignment with yourself. That's the big thing I preach to everybody. I got in alignment with myself. Boxing, I went on to win a Golden Glove state championship. I tried it when I moved to Colorado. I tried to keep going. Work picked up, life picked up, whatever it was. And I found myself on this new journey of fitness and overcoming trauma. Most of these people out here, they say, I like to help people lose fat, build muscle, whatever the fact is. I like to help people become the person they always needed growing up. That's what I say. So when this first took off, my niche, so to say, was blue collar workers. We work directly one to one with that. I've been doing this for a decade now. I can give you an answer for every objection you come at me with, but my biggest thing related to, are you the person you needed growing up? And so that is where I find the most help in people. I don't push fitness on nobody, but I've never seen somebody not excel in every other aspect in their life. So after I figured out, like, man, I went through the worst of the worst. I've overcame this by getting in alignment with myself through fitness, nutrition, mindset, whatever the fact is. And now, like I said, the highest level of growth, self-transcendence. You heal yourself and then you teach others to do the same. Now I'm going to impute this knowledge to somebody else. That's where this started going. That's when you came into the picture. I'm like, man, I don't even know where to get started with all of this. And next thing you know, here's the blueprint. You give me the blueprint, things started taking off. And that's where I'm at today.
I love it, brother. I love it. Now, what were some of the things that were challenging for you when it came from, coming from this freaking 2 a.m. to 7 p.m. lifestyle of working out in the field, getting your hands dirty? You're doing real work in an office, checking your phone, checking your emails. It's not like you can double down on your business and work at the same time. What were the challenges for you when you were coming from that background, then switching over to running your own business for the first time? Obviously, there's personal growth that like you can help people, but then also you're transforming as well into an entrepreneur, into a business owner. So what were some of the changes and growth that you had to experience in order for you to succeed?
It's a great question. One thing I tell all my clients, I tell everybody that comes to me for any sort of inspiration, for guidance, whatever, my biggest thing is I say the work instills the worth, right? So originally talking with Ryan, that's a great friend of mine now. You introduced me to Ryan. He's like, hey man, listen, if you don't have X amount of time per week to put into this, this isn't going to work out. I knew this is something I wanted to do. And every one of you guys knew my schedule already. I wake up 2:30 a.m. every day. I go to the gym, I come back home, I drive an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half one way to work, where I work outside 10 hours a day year round. I come back home, or Tuesdays and Thursdays I go to class to the other side of the city till 8 p.m. I come all the way back over here and I turn around, go to sleep and do it all over again.
Mhm.
So adding all this into it, this is the big thing when the limiting beliefs do come into effect. And it's a huge thing that PTBI taught me, that like, hey man, if you don't have this amount of time to invest in this, this isn't going to work out. And whether people like to hear that or not, that's the real factor behind this. But I told myself I'm going to make this work, because this is something I'm passionate about. If you're not passionate about what you're going to do, this is not going to work out. So I found a way. Adjusted schedules here and there, and I made it work. So whether I was working out in the field all day, waking up at 2:30 a.m., coming home, as soon as I get home, changing my shirt, coming into the office, hopping on a sales call, hopping on with a client call, whatever the fact is, we're going to make this work. The work instills the worth. You get in what you put out. And so I knew it was grind time. I'm still in that grind. Can it happen? We just excelled tremendously from where I first started to where I'm at now.
Yeah, dude. And you said that you've essentially doubled the goal or the expectation that you had coming into the program. You said you had a revenue goal where, hey, if I made this much, I'd be happy. And now you've doubled it. And it hasn't even been a year yet.
Not
And
even a year.
it's really, really incredible. I'm curious, man, was there any moments where you felt like throwing in the towel, maybe 3 months in, you're like, man, maybe this isn't for me, but you kept pushing, or, you found a moment of inspiration. Maybe there was a conversation that kept you going. Did any of that come up for you?
Absolutely. Limiting beliefs still come into play. As much as I've elevated personally in the business, whatever the fact is, limiting beliefs will always come into play. It's how you learn to overcome them. I'm sure yourself, you've encountered them. When I first got into PTBI, I launched the business and all that. Things were great. It was like late July, I want to say, of last year. And I signed a couple clients. June, July, August was good. September was good. I didn't sign one client October, not one. I became complacent. And I remember I got a hold of you and you're like, hey man, this is how things fold. This is how things unfold sometimes. I'm like, hey man, I'm having trouble with X, Y, and Z. And you're like, welcome to being an entrepreneur. Just wait. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, it was an awakening for myself. But putting into it, the limiting beliefs come into play. I'm like, man, maybe this really isn't for me. There's days where I had a super hard day at work. I'm hitting 20,000 steps, walking up and down this mile of conduit that I'm running, pulling wire, whatever the fact is, just brainstorming. You're just so exhausted. You still have to come home and perform. Some days you're ready to tap out. But But right there, you have that deciding factor. Do I want to quit or do I want to show up? That is the biggest thing. People ask me, how do I wake up at 2:30 a.m. every day? Well, I get mad and I scream and then I get up and do it anyways. That's it. You wake up, I don't even know, 4 a.m. every day.
3:30.
Is that what it
3:30.
is?
You got me beat by an hour. I don't need to
3:30.
be up at 2:30, so we're good.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's depending on your schedule. People tell me it's the same gym at 3 a.m. as it is at 3 p.m. Yes, it
Mhm.
is. This just works for my schedule. There's one day, promise everybody this, you can document this. There will be a day that I don't have to wake up at that, but I find enjoyment in that. I wake up, there's over 500,000 people in the city, and I'm driving to the gym. There's not one car. I'm stacking wins early, is what I like to say. By the time I go to the gym and I complete it alive, I've raised my frequency for the day and I'm ready to go. We're just getting it. I show up to work and these other guys that haven't done that, they haven't shown up for themselves. They're coming in low frequency. They're not ready to get after it. Like, that's fine. I'm not going to knock nobody. I just know I have to give it to myself first. That's what I preach time in and time out. So as far as limiting beliefs go, yes, they still come into play. I'm ready to, man, maybe this isn't for me time and time again. But then when that one client was like, hey man, female or male, I coach both of them. And they're like, I just want to let you know you're great at what you do. I get texts all week long, messages, whatever it is on my training. And they're like, I appreciate you changing my life for me. All that right there is the highest level of growth. You just change this person's life. And that's why I do what I do. So right there sparks it back up. Okay, maybe I am doing something right. All it is the mindset. And you just have to find what you're in it for.
I love it, dude. I love it. Just out of curiosity, this is kind of a side tangent. I know you wake up at 2:30. Has there ever been a time where you hit the snooze button and you're like, I'll pass on it today?
Absolutely. I have about 13 alarms set between between about 2:20 to about 2:40, 45, whatever. There's 3-minute segments in between there. And there is some days. There
Yeah.
is, I would say, like Wednesdays are the midweek struggle
Mhm.
because I'm just time in and time out, just going, going, going. And sometimes this is the biggest factor in it. And I have a coach myself. Coaches need coaches. And they're
Mhm.
like, biggest thing, you have a coach and I have a coach. And I told him, like, hey man, I just want to be honest with you. I didn't hit my workout the last 2 days. I'm tired. Work caught up to me, life caught up to me, business caught up to me. He's like, hey, take a break. Admit it, you're human. And as much as I tell people you need to become undeniable about these non-negotiable acts in your life. And as much as I'm on point all the time, I needed a break myself. Everybody needs that disconnect at some point in time. So yes, there is times where I want to hit that disconnect or that snooze, just whatever, let it go. That biofeedback really comes into play as to recovery and everything else. We don't need to dive into all that, but there is times where I'm like, hey, you need a break.
I ask because I do the same thing. I'd say once every 2 weeks, I'll wake up. I'll never not wake up. That's the thing. I'll always wake up. But once every
Yes.
2 weeks, I'll wake up and I'll get out of bed. And I'm like, I should probably go back and get a couple hours of sleep. And I'll allow myself to do that. I have a question for you, man. You work in the field, lots of guys acting tough. You've told me a lot about the industry that you work in, about these blue collar guys. A lot of them have shields up. When you're talking to these guys about changing their lives, changing their habits, how do you break through with them and get them vulnerable and get them into a place to where they admit that they need help from another man to change their life? What's your process in breaking through to these people?
You just got to get them to be honest, man. A lot of these guys are too tough for their own selves. I like to say, this is explicit, but I like to say, you have them call themselves bitches. And they're like, what? No, I'm like, I'm being honest. You got to admit where you're messing up in life. My approach is hard truth. Where are you going wrong in your life? I ask all these people on these sales calls, what are your bad habits in life? Are you willing to give up this to invest in yourself, right? Just being honest with yourself. A lot of people won't be honest with themselves. And that's the biggest thing. People, like I've told you before, they like to shame glorify, whether they say they like to be fat or whatever, out of shape. You just gotta have a different approach. The people that are gonna sit there and continue to counter you are the people that don't want to elevate in their life. I work with men like this all day long, and they just try to sit there and go back and forth with you. I'm like, hey man, that's fine. You're a grown man, you have tits, right? You got walleye titties, they're pointing out to the side. Don't try to sit here and go back and forth with me. That's all it is. Don't push this on nobody, but like I've said time and time again, I've never seen nobody excel in every other aspect in their life when they got in alignment with themselves.
Mhm.
So with saying that, these guys are the blue collar workers. There is some true hardworking guys out there who will never take anything from them, but a lot of these guys are in denial. They're in, I don't even know the term for it. They think they show up and work hard all day when in reality they don't. They're finding themselves showing up to work and doing as little work as possible to get paid the most amount of money. When my mentality is, I've been up since 2:30. I've been getting it ever since. And you know what I'm saying? With the business on top of still working full time, I'm sitting good. We're good all around here, and we're only selling through here. But my mindset behind it is, you need to wake up every day like you're broke and hungry. I don't care if you have $10 in the bank or $1,000,000 in the bank. You need to wake up every day like you're broke and hungry, because it's not about you. If you have a kid, if if you have a wife, whatever the fact is, it's not about you. You need to show up for yourself first. Put in the work for yourself, because your level that you show up, it reflects on everybody around you. If you love yourself to this extent, you love your family to that extent. If you think you show up working hard all day long and you come home all low frequency, you kick your feet up, like cracking beers, expecting your wife to do X, Y, and Z for you, you're only loving your family to that. I show up for myself first so I can love everybody else around me outside of my family to the highest level. You need to wake up every day like you're broke and hungry. That's my mentality behind it. Sometimes, and this has happened to me time and time again, you get complacent. You need to dig deep and find something else. What's the reasoning why we're doing this right here and now? You need to wake up every day like you're broken because it's time to get after it.
That's really, really powerful stuff, because I feel like in sales and in fitness, you have to be confident enough to call people out and put them in their spot to get them to realize that they need help. And a lot of people who are just getting started, never done sales calls before, they're totally timid to do so. So what advice would you give to someone who's taking their first sales call and, has to, kind of show people the way? What advice would you give someone who's just getting started in that process?
It's a great question. I would say I've met very few people that are busier than I am, and I have the utmost respect for them. So if you have a loaded schedule or if you have an open schedule, whatever the fact is, all this is hard. All this is extra stressors in your life. And the biggest thing you can do is breathe, relax, and understand that not all this happens in a day. Whether you got this guy over here that just hit a 10K month his first month, 20K month his first month, it don't matter. My first month, I think I hit like $700. It doesn't matter. What did you put in, right? So just relax and breathe and understand that everything's going to go at your own pace. It doesn't matter how this thing unfolds, and understand, like I said, the work and still the work. I'm now 3 mentors in. Talk to you about this personally, and we're going to keep going. PTBI was a gateway, and it's just a compounding effect. And so 3 mentors in, I've learned phenomenal amount of knowledge behind it. And that's just more offering that I have for my clients as well. So what was the question again? You told me?
Just advice for people who are starting out, maybe a little timid to show up powerfully on sales calls and really, really inspire people to change their ways, take action.
That's a huge thing. As I found myself more doing these interviews, I have ADHD, so I get to running with things and I completely venture off.
It's what makes you you, man. I tell everybody, you got special energy. It's Nick energy. So
It doesn't miss. That's what I say.
yeah.
As far as the timidness behind it, I did not want to invest in the PTBI. I talked about that early in the call. There was a couple after me and you first started talking. There's a million other things that popped up, Instagram, whatever. Hey, this and that, whatever. I did my research on Zakk Colburn, what I did, and everything came out true colors. And the biggest advice I give to anybody is take the risk. My saying is the sacrifice creates the paradise. If you will never take that sacrifice to learn, to excel, you won't be where you want to be 5 years, 10 years down the road. Everything I've invested in, like I said, I've made that back now. We're only up here. Taking the risk is the biggest factor. So I ask everybody, there's 2 types of people in this world. There's circumstantial and there's intentional. A lot of people got handed down some terrible circumstances from their parents and they just took it and like, this is how life unfolds. Or somewhere along the line, you can become intentional about how your life plays out. I got handed down some shit ass circumstances from my parents, but I chose to be like, I'm not going to let this fold out that way. I'm going to break this generational trauma and we're going to change the way this whole thing is going. You become intentional about your actions and you invest into people that can teach you the way. I did not want to invest into a mentor. I was like, I can figure out all this on my own. But the time you save, if I didn't invest in a BTBI, I would have spent this amount of time figuring it out on my own versus paying for the mentorship and getting it in this amount of time and then capitalizing on it, making that money back. And now we're beyond that.
Mhm.
You have to invest in the people that can teach you the way and excel from there. You got to take the risk.
I love it, man. I want to share one more moment that I think is a come full circle. When you finally joined PTBI, you sent me a text message and said, I'm going to be one of your success stories. I'm going to be on one of these interviews. And, been about like 6 months, maybe a little bit more. I shot you a message that said, hey, man, you'd be down to do a client success interview? And you sent me a screenshot, the very first conversation. You're like, I made it. So I just want to say, dude, like, I really appreciate you, believing in PTBI, believing in me, believing in Ryan, and believing in Jen, believing in the whole team, also believing in yourself, and also sticking with it, man, because I know it hasn't been easy. You're probably the one with the craziest schedule that I've ever seen, and you're making it happen. So I just want to ask you, man, 2024, it's March. We're about 3 years into the new year. This is your first calendar year from January to December where you have your business, right? So this sets the standard. What's the goal for 2024? Where do you want to take this business? What's your vision looking like for this year?
Man, that's a lot to unpack because I've taken off with this. The vision is tremendous. My business name is No Limit Fitness, and that extends outside of fitness fitness. There's no limit to what you can take this, your mindset, your financial, your fitness, whatever it is. There's no limit to this. You may have had a terrible life, terrible circumstances, terrible situation, whatever the fact is, there's no limit what you can create out of it. Take that and use that as energy. You always said, I got some high energy and we're running from there, right? So as far as 2024 goes, we're already on roll to beat what I beat in the first 6 months of last year to what I'm on now. Like it's just capitalizing tremendously. So as far as numbers go, I haven't figured out numbers. I have a thought in mind while still working full time. I made 6 figures last year working as an electrician. I want to make an extra minimum 50K this year, and I'm already on track to doing that within the business.
I love it.
To really break down numbers, the end goal is to eventually get my wife out of work. We're going to end up having another kid. We have a beautiful 8-year-old daughter now, and she's going to end up getting out of work. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to get this business. And eventually, when the time is right, I'm going to get out of the field, and this business is going to take care of everything. But that all goes back to the work instills the worth. I'm going to take care of everything. But right now, investing in a mentorship, investing the time, the energy, whatever it is, I don't miss. That's what I tell people. And I continue to show up every single day. And that's where I've got to where I'm at today. The times that I didn't, or the times that I didn't sign nobody, the times that I came up short because I wasn't putting in the work. You have to put in the time and energy. So 2024, we're taking up. And my biggest factor is, my biggest goal is, I'm going to end up with that Rolex on my wrist. I have not forgot that. That's the goal. But the things are huge, man. This has opened up opportunities. My family came from the bottom of nothing, Zakk. When I tell you that, I'm about to go to Italy, bro. My record has cleared enough to where I got approved for a passport. I'm making it happen now. PTBI has given me this option to have a new life. You became intentional about your actions to improve your lifestyle. And not only for myself, for my daughter, my wife, everybody else around me. Investing into mentors is the best thing I ever did.
I love it, dude. I love it. That almost brought a tear to my eye, man. The hearing you say I'm going to Italy is fucking incredible, man. I'm stoked. So, where can people find you online and any final messages?
You can find me at I am Nick underscore Nick with 2 N's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever the fact is. Final words is, man, if this is something you're on the edge about doing, if you're intentional about your actions, this is one thing I ask everybody for that's signing on my program. This is hard. Is this something you think you can do? And if it's anything other than the word yes, it's not going to work out. You need to be intentional about wanting to change your life. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. It's not. That all goes back to, like I said, the work instills the word. The sacrifice creates paradise. Quotes all day long. We can drop these one-liners continuously. I'm just telling you, you need to put in the work. Some of this comes easy to people, but it's never came easy to me. I've had to grind every single day in and day out, waking up at 2:30, going to the gym, coming back home, working outside in the middle of a snowstorm, 10-hour days, going to school, coming back across the city at 8 p.m., going to bed, turn around, waking up and doing it all over again. I don't miss, but I continue to show up for not only myself, but for everybody else around me, for my clients, family, whatever the fact is, we keep going. So taking the risk, that's it. Are you intentional about your actions? That's going to determine your future. That's my final words behind it.
I love it. Nick, thank you so much, man. One of these
Thank
days, we'll have you at our live event. I definitely know that you're going to be a speaker there. So I'm going to be excited to
you.
pass the torch. For everyone watching, thank you so much. Catch you in the next one. Nick, peace.